Hi there, I'm Doy Santos and you're on the Cusp. Today on the Cusp, we're going to be assessing the K-12 program. We're going to be assessing it from the point of view of someone who, for the most part of the Aquino administration, was its public face. And we're going to be picking his brain about what he thinks were its successes and challenges, and what he thinks are its what should be the agenda of the program of education reform moving forward. So with me today, after returning to the private sector, is the former Department of Education Assistant Secretary Elvin Uy. Asec, welcome to the Cusp.
Well, thank you.
Do you mind if I call you Elvin? Before we get started, I believe congratulations are in order because you just recently were presented by your alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University, with an award. So could you please tell us a little bit about this distinction that you received for your work in the department?
Right. Well, the Carnegie Mellon University Alumni Association,
yes,
they have an annual awards for some of their alumni, and I was fortunate enough to be selected for the most outstanding recent alumni awardee. So they give this award to those who graduated in the last 10 years. I was fortunate enough to finish public policy and management in Carnegie Mellon, Australia, same university as you. That was in 2010, so I was still eligible for that award. But that award was really, I think, an affirmation, not so much of my work, but the reforms that we did from 2010 to 2016 in the Department of Education. And that's what we will be talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, I spoke to someone from CMU and he actually said that this is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize, you know? This is the highest award, distinction that they can give to an alumnus. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, so now you're back in the private sector, right? Previous to your assignment in the department, you were also in the private sector.
That's right.
You were working in the telecoms industry, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, because you're an engineer by background, are you now?
That's correct.
Yeah. So how did you get involved in education? No? Was it really your plan or preference, like after graduating from graduate school? Was it your plan really to enter public service after completing?
Well, the short story of it, so my background, at least in college, was electronics and communications engineering. I ended up working for a telecommunications company for 4.5 years. I was doing product management, business development, but I wanted to get into development sector, and I felt getting a postgraduate degree in public policy would be a way to at least have some credibility, some expertise into that sector.
So development meaning working with aid agencies.
Actually, I was looking to going into multilateral organizations after finishing my degree, but I couldn't find a way in. And by some miracle, I guess, or some coincidence, I ended up emailing former Secretary Brother Armin Luisro. I don't know him, or I didn't know him personally, but a good friend of mine used to work for him. And at that time, my friend said he just needs people he can trust and who can help him with a lot of the reforms that they were planning. So I emailed Brother Armin, got a reply, and that was it. They asked if I could help them on two things, whether K-12, the reform that was in its inception at that time, or IT. And I said, I'm not interested with IT. Let me do the major reform because when I was studying,
you wanted the hard stuff.
Basically, yes. Wanted to hit myself in the head. No, but when I was in Australia, when we were studying for public policy, that's when the new government released its policy paper on K-12. And I remember reading the policy brief about it. I felt it was a very good idea, but I was quite skeptical of not just the government's ability, but the country's capacity to do it in the timeline that they were seeking. And I felt when they finally asked me if I could help in that regard, I said it's easy to be a commentator or to critique government and to say you have to do this and not do that. But that was my chance to do something for something I truly believed in.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into government.
Right. So your first assignment in the department, you were actually the manager. Were you the program manager or the program?
So I joined the Department of Education in 2011. I was the K-12 program coordinator.
I see. All right.
And at that time, this was when there was no curriculum yet for K-12. The legislation for it was still being deliberated in Congress, both House and the Senate. The budget for it was also being finalized. So this was actually the perfect time to get into it.
Right at the beginning.
There's been months of work done on it, but nothing has been finalized. And we were less than a year away from implementing the new curriculum for elementary and for junior high school. So I came in at the right time, and then I served as K-12 program coordinator until they appointed me assistant secretary in May of 2015. So by the time I left DepEd last year, I was assistant secretary for curriculum and instruction.
But so, in your stint in government, it was really the K-12, which was really your baby, right? It was like, this was what you were known for, and you were fronting up to all sorts of questions.
Initially, but by the end of it, and I think you realize this once you're in government, whether you're handling education portfolio or finance, or even security, they ask you anything and everything about the topic. So, Brother Armin, every time, for example, there's a budget hearing, he gets asked everything.
Yes, you have to be across the entire portfolio.
That's correct. That's correct. So I think that's the most challenging part of the job, that you have to know almost everything about your sector.
And it's a massive department. It's the biggest employer, isn't it, in government? Like the biggest budget.
It is.
And it's a huge responsibility, to be in charge of that entire bureaucracy, teachers, principals, superintendents. It's a big, massive bureaucracy. We sort of underestimate how big it is, but it is the biggest employer in government. No? So there are very many misconceptions about K-12. People think it's just year 11 and 12. So can you just, talk a little bit about what K-12 is, because some people, I think, don't realize that it includes kindergarten, having a universal kindergarten, and then some other things. So could you elaborate a little bit?
That's correct. So let's start with where we were prior to the reform. Before K-12, the Philippines had basically a 10-year basic education system. 6 years in elementary, 4 years in secondary education or high school. And government only funded those 10 years. What the K-12 program wanted to achieve was that we move down a bit. We start with kindergarten before grade 1. So 1 year of kindergarten for age 5 Filipinos, followed still by 6 years of elementary. And then from 4 years of high school education, we expanded into 6 years of high school. And that's further divided into 4 years of junior high school. So that's grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10. And then 2 years of senior high school, grades 11 and 12. So that's why it's called the K6-4-2 model. Kindergarten for 1 year, 6 years of elementary, 4 years of junior high, 2 years of senior high school. A common misconception is that K-12 or the program only includes 11 and 12 and only started last year.
Yes, that's what people think.
Right. The real program started as early as 2011. So that's when government decided to fund and implement what we call universal kindergarten. So making sure all public schools, public elementary schools, there's more than 38,000 of them nationwide, offer free kindergarten programs. And then we started modifying the curriculum for elementary and junior high school in 2012. And then last year was when we finally implemented nationwide senior high school. So we had the first batch of grade 11 students in 2016, followed by the first batch of grade 12 students nationwide this year, 2017. So by 2018, by next year, we will have the first batch of grade 12 graduates. But those graduates aren't really the full K-12 graduates yet. They went through the old elementary program from grade 1 to grade 6. and the new curriculum in junior high school and in senior high school, the real full K-12 graduates, as we refer to them, are those that will finish in 2024.
Oh,
that's in the next administration.
Yes, yeah.
So which underscores the fact that basic education reforms really takes more than one administration. Yes, yeah. Ideally, you have 2 administrations to say the reforms, if not 3 administrations, saying that this is what the kind of runway that we have, and that whatever was started by one president can be strengthened and enhanced by the next 2.
And in fact, it was under Gloria's administration where the concept for K-12 was sort of formulated, right, with a task force that recommended
that's
K-12, and so Pinoy and then Duterte, and then the real graduates will be after him because he steps down in 2022.
That's correct.
So were you worried at first when Duterte came out with some pronouncements when he was newly elected that he didn't favor the K-12, that he was going to scrap it? Right. So were you fearful that all that hard work that you had put in was just going to go to waste?
Right. Well, when President Duterte was deemed president-elect the day of the elections, I think a week after he gave his first ever press conference, at that time, his answer about K-12 was he wasn't sure.
Right.
He wasn't sure. But personally, he was against it.
It's funny because you went to an election and you weren't sure about your policy.
That's correct.
That's kind of...
That's correct. But in terms of where he stood, he said that he heard grievances or criticism about maybe job displacement for certain professors, certain staff, and he was mindful of that effect. So,
but you were mindful of it as well, weren't you?
We were, as early as 2012, 2013. But so from a political messaging standpoint, that sent a bit of shockwaves throughout the bureaucracy. That what if the new president does decide to scrap it?
Yes.
But at least from our side, at the national office level, from the secretary down to our directors, the leaders, we were saying the law was on our side. Meaning this reform was legislated for institutionalization purposes, and we felt that if the president decided otherwise, we could always convince him or her that we can't. I mean, it's not a choice anymore. Well, the law does say we have to implement it.
You need to change the law, and that would take 1-2 years perhaps.
That's right.
By which time, you've got these students that are going through. So I guess in the end, he realized that it just didn't make sense, right? Just push through with it, deal with the adverse consequences, if any, and so it was sort of like an accommodation, I suppose, that he made.
Maybe. But that uncertainty probably lasted maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks at most. Because by the end of May, early June, he did say that he spoke to several bright guys.
Okay. Who these bright guys?
From DepEd. Okay. I also don't know. To be quite honest, we never found out who those bright guys were.
Right.
And supposedly these experts or these individuals convinced him about the merits of the program. So this was even before he tagged or he appointed Secretary Leonor Briones.
I see.
And
so it wasn't her influence.
No, not even.
The transition team, he got
whoever was in Davao at that time.
So at least he was willing to take advice, contrary to what his pronouncements were, and he altered his views accordingly.
Right.
I think that's in fairness to him. I mean, he tends to make statements, but he kind of just sort of has, dignified, I guess, backtracking a bit. But you mentioned Secretary Briones. When she assumed, when it was announced that she was to be secretary, shortly thereafter, I think she laid out what she felt would be the emphasis of her term as Secretary of Education, which was the alternative learning system, the ALS. No, so she said K-12 will run through, but that's not really going to be sort of the heart and soul of what she's. Her focus would be ALS. So maybe perhaps from that angle, it was like, it was going to be downgraded a bit. And then there was the Supreme Court challenge which just recently was ruled in favor of the K-12. So I guess we can close that chapter. Do you think it's over, like all the challenges?
Well, I think the legal challenge, at least to the legislation, to make the reform permanent, I think that's over. So the real challenge now is the actual implementation and in seeing the fruits of the reform. So whether, for example, the graduates next year, whether they go to college, they go to tech voc, or they go to employment or entrepreneurship, whether their outcomes, their skills are better compared to their predecessors.
Because they said that it would lead to dropouts. People would not be able to cope with the extra expense and would not be able to go to university as a result. Do you think those views were founded? Like, there was so much criticism, like not enough classrooms, teachers at the basic level pa lang, and then here you are adding on top of that. So do you think those things had basis? How did you deal with all of them when you were there?
Maybe about 2 years to a year before 2016, the implementation of senior high school. One of the doomsday scenario was there would be massive dropouts from grade 10 to grade 11, and then you would have, but at the same time, in the same vein, you will have far fewer first-year college students.
I see.
Obviously, they cannot happen at the same time, but for some reason, the doomsday scenario says we'll have both. The good news is, last year, there were 1.5 million grade 11 students. Out of 1.5 million grade 10 completers.
So halos, they all re-enrolled?
Almost. Actually, the even better news, we had, or the Department of Education had students who came from previous batches, completed high school, but did not go to college or did not finish college. So what DepEd did was to open its doors to these cohort of students who want free education. And as of, I think, August or September last year, there were about 60 to 70,000 of them
who returned.
DepEd calls them balik-aral students. So in fact, they went into senior high school because they felt it might be a better, or it could be a good opportunity to acquire skills for employment, for other opportunities.
Since they haven't been studying for a while, they really needed that, as a preparatory to college. And
that's correct.
The criticism, I guess we talk about the case for reform. Now, why did we need to go through this in the first place? I think one of the main things was that the university sector was like, and K-10 was never meant to be permanent, right? That's one of the misconceptions now that why are you doing this? Well, this was the original intention to begin with, no? The thing is, the university sector, as a result, was clamoring for change, I think, because the freshmen were not equipped, I think, no? So what else was the case for reform in the first place?
Well, I think the main impetus for DepEd, at least for the past administration, was we wanted to develop the human capital of the Philippines. And education is by far one of the most significant things you can do to really strengthen your human capital development. And when we looked at the landscape here, and obviously worldwide, the Philippines was the last country with just 10 years of publicly funded mandatory basic education. We said that's clearly not enough. So we said, let's look at making sure their Filipinos are better prepared for formal structured schooling. So we have to have at least 1 year of kindergarten. Most developed countries are debating whether it should be 2, 3, even 4 years prior to grade 1. We're just at 1 year prior to grade 1. And then beyond that, we said,
at least people tend to underestimate that as well, because studies have shown what you do in the kinder years is going to impact them all the way to when they're working. Like that's the most crucial point in the development of a child, of a person's life, right? So we tend to, and people think K-12 is just years 11 and 12, when in fact, when did the K of the K-12 start? It was
in 2011.
Yes, that's right.
So we had to make sure that kindergarten was accessible to everyone, especially those in the public schools. And then we had to enhance and tweak and fix some parts of elementary and high school. For example, to strengthen language proficiency, to improve math and science fluency, and so on and so forth. So one of the main reforms, for example, was the introduction of what we call mother tongue-based multilingual education. It's a mouthful, MEBMLE.
Oh, yeah.
And the basic idea is from kinder to grade 3, we teach our students, young kids, in their native language.
Their first language, yeah.
Right.
Some people are really adamantly opposed to that, no?
They are.
They see like, yeah, it will erode our competitiveness because English is what attracts, you know, the PPOs to come here and all this and all that, you know.
Right.
But and even in the US, that's a thing, you know, like should we be teaching students in Spanish, that sort of thing, no? That controversy is still raging, I think, no?
It still is, but at least in the Philippines, it's too early to tell actually.
Yes.
If it has worked. But this is, by now, the first batch of grade 1 students in 2012 who went through the mother tongue program are in grade 6.
Right.
So
we can compare their test scores to
exactly. So the time is right for government and for the department to start assessing and making an honest to goodness longitudinal study on comparison on just how this current cohort under the new curriculum, under the new program are doing vis-a-vis those from the previous systems.
Yeah. Because just as an aside, even in Australia, the controversy is like, should we teach indigenous children, you know, in their language as well?
Right.
So that's a whole can of worms. But you know, I think that's sort of pretty settled down now, and we can compare. We can use the evidence as opposed to just you and me asserting our opinions. That's I think you make a fine point there. Right. Now let's switch over now to talk about, you know, the private sector's contribution to the reforms. Now, it wasn't just all public. You had, because of the lack of classrooms, you were upfront about that you couldn't accommodate all of them. So you invited all of these private and also the state universities to provide, you know, the shortfall. Do you think it was the right decision to leverage their assets and human capital and also you had a school voucher program where you said, in order to pay for that, the government will now, you know, issue a voucher to these students and these private colleges. So some said that was the privatization of the education sector. So, do you think that was the right decision in hindsight?
In hindsight, I think it was the only decision that it could have done.
Yeah.
So just to give your audience context on where we were 7 years ago. In 2010, when previous administration started, we inherited a backlog of more than 68,000 classrooms, more than 150,000 public school teachers nationwide. Yes. And then you had gaps in learning resources, in other materials, in water and sanitation facilities. So you just have shortages everywhere.
My God.
And the budget at that time for DepEd was 175 billion pesos.
Yes, that's right.
That's roughly 8,000 pesos per year for a public school student. By the time we left last year, the budget had increased to 430 plus billion pesos.
Yes.
Roughly 18,000 per student per year.
So it nearly tripled. It nearly from
more than twice.
Yeah,
in the last 6 years, during our time, we said we have to make massive investments in new facilities, new equipment and tools, new teachers. So more than 100,000 classrooms, more than 100,000 new public school teacher items, procurement in everything from ICT facilities and equipment to science and math tools, to basic seats and chairs, and also toilet and water and sanitation facilities. But even with all of that investment, we had to, and this is to address the concern about possible job displacement.
Yes.
Meaning if, because of grade 11, the students who would have been in first year college might or are required to be in high school, senior high school. So that could lead to a massive reduction in the college enrollment figures. And that might lead to professors and non-teaching staff being let go. So we said there will be a situation by 2016 that the public school system for high school needed more facilities, more teachers, while higher education, both public and private, might have a surplus of capacity. So we
right.
said, let's find a mechanism where the funds are there anyway.
Right.
How do we tap these surplus capacity, and how do we lead students and families to those choices? Whether they want to stay in their public high school or they want to transfer to a private university, private college, or maybe even a state university that offers senior high school. So that was essentially the voucher program that was launched last year. I think it is probably the biggest of its kind, at least in Southeast Asia. I don't know if you have anything comparable maybe in India or Pakistan or parts of Europe or even the US, but regarding the criticism about privatization, the budget of DepEd this year is over $500 billion pesos, about 540 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Out of that 540 billion, the budget for this program, plus the subsidy for private junior high school students, is less than 25 billion pesos.
I think I know where you're heading with this. So it's not really a privatization if it's such, what is that, 5% of the, no. 5% of the budget, sort of.
Correct.
So it can't be a privatization, and it's only, a drop, almost a drop in the bucket. But you know how some people, they get really antsy, the minute you mention private schools, they go, oh no, the unions. Did you have difficulty with the teachers unions?
We did. So there are a lot of progressive militant groups in the Philippines, in Congress, obviously in public schools. They were opposed to, for example, the voucher program. They felt, as you mentioned, that we're encouraging students to transfer from public to private. Actually, the actual data is, out of the 1.5 million grade 11 students last year, maybe around 30%, 30 to 40% transferred from public to private, which was okay. That was
30%. 30%.
Yes. Those who finished grade 10 in public, about 30% of them transferred.
So about 450,000 students.
Thereabouts, which was exactly our projection.
And the prediction that there would be massive dropouts didn't materialize.
Not at all, because DepEd had 1.5 million grade 10 completers in 2016. And about 95%. About 95%. So you still had about 4 to 5% who chose not to enroll.
Which is the normal sort of attrition rate, I would think.
It is the normal attrition rate. But, and this I have to emphasize, before or prior to K-12, you had maybe 1.5 million high school graduates, but the number of first-year college students was around 900,000.
Oh, right.
So your attrition was over 40%, 600,000.
It's massive.
Last year, the attrition was less than 5%.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that we always said to a lot of the critics or skeptics. We say,
and some even returned, didn't they?
That's correct.
They had dropped out a long time ago. They never went on to university. They finished year 10, but they returned and started schooling again.
That's correct. So one of the things we say to the skeptics, there's a lot of things that you can say about K-12, but one of at its heart, it's really a massive expansion of publicly funded education.
That's it.
Which is a decades-long struggle by so many people, both progressives and conservatives. We've always said that education is important. We have to spend more on it as a government or as a society. And for the last 6 years, that's what we've been doing. And I think that's one thing I'm personally encouraged by with the current administration for all of its priorities and maybe rhetoric. The investment in education is continuing, and that's a good thing.
For sure. I think that the transition from Aquino to Duterte. I was just at a conference and Secretary Briones was talking about the massive investment that they needed. And it just seems that they've just taken that baton and run with it, which is good, which is actually a compliment to all those who came before, because I think you build on the reforms that other administrations have made. You don't just chuck everything out, just as the Aquino administration continued, K to 12, so that's a good thing, I reckon. So it's too early to tell now, but do you have any predictions? Gaze into your crystal ball as far as the outcomes of this reform are concerned. Will it result in the intended policy aims, do you think?
Well, I hope so, but I think even without a crystal ball, the good news is, for example, the DepEd, if it decides to do what we made as a decision and as a policy direction. For example, DepEd will start to participate in international large-scale assessments.
Oh, that's important. Yeah.
So there's a plan, for example, for DepEd to participate in PISA in 2018.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So we will be one of the last entrants from Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Indonesia has done it.
PISA is what is PISA?
PISA is the assessment for essentially age 10 students.
So grade 5.
Age 14 students. But this is grade 8 level throughout the world.
Grade 8, okay.
And what they do is they measure the competency and capabilities of students in reading, in math, in science, in critical thinking. And it's normally not meant to be a comparison between countries.
No.
It's meant to be an internal assessment of the strengths and maybe the weaknesses of your education system. But what gets a lot of print is how countries stack up against each other. So how Australia fares.
The league table.
That's correct. Against Singapore and Finland.
Yes, the Scandinavian.
And Shanghai of China.
Okay.
Because they're very selective on the schools that participate. Yeah. But that's a good thing for the Philippines because you cannot just have DepEd and government measuring its own progress. There has to be a disinterested or maybe a disaffected third party making an objective assessment.
Yeah, because if you're evaluating yourself, you can just give yourself an A grade.
That's correct. But bottom line, the policy aim really of K to 12 and of all of these human capital development program is to make sure Filipinos are better equipped for the workplace of the future. So whether that's employment or entrepreneurship, we want more people with decent jobs, taking care of themselves and their families, and being participative in our civic processes. So I'm sure you're familiar with Ambition 2040, right? And that's one of the things we're trying to look into. Hopefully, the program does lead to better outcomes in further education or in employment or in the world of work.
But comparing us to a country like Singapore or Finland, where the number of people is like, probably
maybe 5 million for Singapore.
So how many school kids are there in that they manage, It'd probably just be one region in the Philippines,
That's right.
Or Finland for that matter, they can afford to have these, big, wonderful systems in place because it's such a small country, whereas the Philippines is so big. Just looking back a bit, were there anything that you would have done differently? What lessons do you think you can learn? You learned from that experience of reform?
Right. I think one of the biggest criticism against the reform was how rushed, quote unquote, or how quick it was. And quick, I guess, is relative. There are obviously government moves at a certain pace, and certain sectors are faster compared to others. With basic education, normally the reforms do take longer. The preparation takes much more than a year or two. So I think that was a very valid criticism about us. The curriculum for K to 12 was formulated starting 2011, and then by 2012 we were implementing parts of it.
Yes.
Normally,
that's quite quick for a government.
It's quite quick for basic education.
Yes.
Normally you give people 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, you'd have a pilot, then you'd evaluate the pilot, then you'd expand it, and
exactly. So I think that's quite valid, but considering the political and economic context at that time, and of the Philippines, not just even of the previous Aquino administration, wherein since the Commonwealth era, there's been attempts to do K to 12, but none of them pushed through. So we felt that if we followed the usual process or try to make it slower or steadier. That maybe we were prepared, but it wouldn't be implemented as we see fit. So we said, considering the pros and cons, we'll go with a more aggressive timeline. And that created a lot of friction, a lot of skepticism, a lot of, and to be quite fair, a lot of birthing pains for everyone within the bureaucracy. But I think looking back, even probably our harshest critics would acknowledge that there's been a lot of gains in the sector. Salaries for teachers have increased. We do have far more classrooms than we had 7 years ago. Far more teacher items than there were ever.
I think that's it. It was a massive jump up, and the sky didn't fall. The doomsday scenario didn't materialize.
That's correct.
So I think it's one of the better case studies of introducing change in the bureaucracy that you're going to find anywhere possibly in Southeast Asia, if not the world, It should be studied for how relatively smooth it went.
Well, given the scale, it looks smooth now, but we were
from a distance. No, but I'm sure there were lots of things that needed ironing out. But by and large, we're still here. The school system hasn't blown up. The budget worked. Exactly. You had people finding their place, and nobody dropped out. That's the main thing, I think. You were able to accommodate 1.5 million those who finished year 10. And so I think there are lessons there. Not necessarily for what you would do. Well, there's always ways and moves you can improve, but what did we actually do right? Because we seldom talk about that. What did we actually do right that caused us to push this huge, massive reform without, breaking the budget or, leading to massive displacements of teachers and students. So I think, there's something there for future generations, policymakers to look at, I think, in terms of that reform. I don't think you actually realize that, that yet, but I think, coming generations are going to look at this and see, what could have been done. How we got through that. But just going ahead now, because this just put us on par with our neighbors or the rest of the world. So now we have K-12, and the rest of the world is saying, we're thinking, oh, what a massive reform. The rest of the world is saying so what?
We've done that since the end of World War II.
Exactly. So moving forward, what do you think are the future reforms, the next steps needed to cement and achieve those outcomes that you were talking about, work readiness and all of that stuff?
Right. Maybe let's distinguish between K-12 and the formal system and that of the alternative learning system. So ideally, any government, any country would want 100% access for the formal school system. And then when students are pushed out of the system, rather than they drop out, because that means it's their fault. We feel it's the system that pushes them out somehow. There has to be a system that catches them, and that's the alternative learning system. So ideally, you strengthen the formal school system for the vast majority of your learners, your population, and then you have good outcomes in terms of the development of 21st century skills, critical thinking, the ability to collaborate, having leadership and ethical values, so on and so forth. But for certain segments of the population, those, for example, with special needs or disabilities, those who are in conflict areas, those who are caught up, say, in the war on drugs, and they're unable to attend or remain in school, there has to be alternative programs that capture and address their unique requirements.
Disengaged youth, right? Because they, by and large, represent most of the unemployed. These people who don't have a high school diploma. Half of the unemployment, people don't realize this. It's just people who've just fallen through the cracks or decided not to pursue schooling.
Actually, speaking of unemployment, one of the things, if you look at the data of government for the past decade, the majority of unemployed Filipinos are either high school graduates or college graduates.
Yes.
They form the biggest segment.
Yes.
And you have people who went through college but did not finish college.
Yeah.
Or people who have gone into tech walk but have not finished tech walk.
Yeah.
And the reasons for their unemployment are different. So the ones that finish college may be unemployed. Some of them might be trying to find the best fit. So for example, they graduated as nurses.
Yes.
And they're trying to find a nursing job.
Yes.
Or they graduated as teachers. They're trying to find an education job. Some of them do have job skills mismatch. That's a reality.
Right.
But for those who merely finish high school,
Yes.
it might be a lack of employable skills.
Yes, that's the one.
So bottom line, either scenario for government, they have to focus on making sure that you're preparing kids and young people, and even those who have fallen through the cracks, and make sure that they're ready for the kind of work environment that they'll be exposed to. So whether they're kids of farmers or fisher folk, or they're in manufacturing zones, or they're here in the city and looking into a career in IT or business process outsourcing, the basic education should give them the foundational skills, knowledge, and values so that they can adapt and learn how to learn.
That's it.
I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yes.
You cannot teach everyone everything they need to know in 12 years.
Yes.
But they must have the ability to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn.
That's right.
As needed by their context.
Because I think that's the key. The future of reform is equipping these students with the ability to learn, not just content, but the ability to learn. That's an important life skill because, as the World Economic Forum said, about 60% of the jobs of the future, haven't even been created.
That's correct.
So you're going to need to adapt and to learn. And our school system needs to produce graduates of that caliber. So once again, ASEC, thank you for answering our questions on the Cusp. Thanks for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you can, guys, you can find future podcasts by logging on to cusp-ph.blogspot.com or by following my Twitter handle, cusp_ph. Follow us also on Facebook at cusp-ph. You can subscribe to the channel. And I'd also love to hear from you. Please give us your comments about what the former ASEC spoke to us about today. Please leave a comment and keep the conversation flowing. Thanks again for watching. I hope to see you again on the next edition of The Cusp.